In 1998, a humble platformer called Banjo-Kazooie from a then very renowned developer called Rare was released, making a sizable splash with the same crowd that enjoyed Super Mario 64, while offering a more visceral and open experience. While Mario 64 featured some character dialogue and all of 2 cutscenes, story took a real backseat to the gameplay and environments, and considering what 3D platforming was at the time in its infancy, it's probably for the best that we wouldn't see any lucrative story content in a Mario game until Super Mario Sunshine. But here comes this bear, who happened to be a playable character in Diddy Kong's badass spin-off racer, with his own world in which he coexists and interacts with other similarly goofy characters like himself. Here the player takes control of him and is actively encouraged to explore every nook and cranny and collect all the jiggies and musical notes, all the while unlocking moves that expand your offensive and movement capabilities, which gives you access to new areas and therefore new levels. Soon the player is introduced to Mumbo Jumbo, who provides level-specific transformations which then let you explore new areas that are full to the brim with personality, all while on a quest to rescue your little sister Tootie. So of course, Banjo-Kazooie was a commercial success, and had an almost immediate follow-up 2 years later in the year 2000. Banjo-Tooie is an interesting entry. It's clearly an expansion of the Banjo formula, now modernly known as the 3D Collectathon, but everything is bigger. The worlds are bigger, the overworld is bigger, the challenges are bigger, and hell, even the bosses are bigger. The game has more moves, more transformations, more new abilities. There's just so much more here. And of course, some people love this, and others not quite as much. I've never met anyone who outright disliked Banjo-Tooie, but I have friends who both love it more, and some don't love it as much as the predecessor. The world is arguably too big, resulting in the exploration feeling a little overwhelming at times, and sometimes just outright frustrating. For example, if you fall from a great height after devoting some time to climbing the environment, it can feel a little daunting to reclaim all of that progress you just lost. But there's also an argument to be made that this makes for a more rewarding gameplay experience, giving the player a sense of accomplishment for exploring these massive worlds and discovering all it has to uncover. For any of its faults, and its achievements in tandem, Banjo-Tooie was a bigger, bolder Banjo game, and is still an increasingly fun entry in the series. Oh, and its GoldenEye-style multiplayer mode is freaking awesome. Go play it if you have it. If you have a 64 and you have a copy of this game, get your buddies, play that right now. Yes, now, pause the video, go, get going. I can't believe I've gone on this long without mentioning the music. Rare's most notable games have always been known for having incredible soundtracks, and Grant Kirkhope's work here, which rivals that of David Wise's music on Diddy Kong Racing, is phenomenal. Each track is really catchy, uses a multitude of differently sampled instruments to create these wholly unique personalities for every level. The way that Treasure Trove Cove uses a Little Mermaid-style xylophone tune, while Freezeezy Peak uses Christmas-like jingle bells to give you a frosty holiday vibe. It all feels very inspired and will undoubtedly stick with you. Banjo without Grant Kirkhope is much like Nintendo without Koji Kondo, or Donkey Kong without David Wise. When it all comes together, it all makes for a very wonderful and very contemporary experience. So sadly, it is at this point in the timeline where I have to point out Banjo's series and Rare as a whole begins to meander. Rare at the time was halfway owned by its founders, and the other half was owned by Nintendo. Through some purchasing hullabaloo, Nintendo wound up selling their shares, and the company was later acquired by Microsoft. Rare committed to a few loose releases through publisher THQ in the midst of this, including a portable Banjo game, but ultimately we would not see any more Banjo for almost 10 years. And of course we all know what happens next. Roll on to late 2008 when Banjo Lego Racers, or more commonly known as Nuts and Bolts, releases. I'm sure even nowadays it still has its fans here or there, but this was an otherwise mediocre game surrounded by a pretty strong air of disappointment, and it's not hard to see why. When its teaser trailer released, it showed more or less what Banjo and Kazooie would look like, and sure as heck implied a new platformer with, new moves, and offered a tease that was definitely familiar to us fans. Unfortunately, the gameplay of Nuts and Bolts pretty certainly did not wind up supporting this, and for it to ultimately wind up revolving the majority of its gameplay around constructing and customizing and racing vehicles was certainly something of a misstep. We have seen since then what teasing familiarity and changing the end product drastically does, and the impact it can have on public perception of these games. While Metroid Prime Federation Force is not, and I emphasize, it's really not a bad game, to reveal it in a time when the Metroid franchise was in a state of limbo, unfortunately that led to a very inevitable public disdain for an otherwise decent spin-off. Or, it's almost like announcing a new Commander Keen and making it some dumb mobile game. Thanks, Bethesda. We love you. It's hard for me to say with confidence whether Nuts and Bolts is indeed a bad game nowadays, especially since I haven't touched it in a very long time, but the disappointment of most online reviewers will probably rightfully deter people away, whether or not I shout its failure or sing its praises. LEGO Racing isn't Banjo. 3D action platforming with a wide list of moves, that's Banjo. And of course, we haven't seen a Banjo game since, because this is one of those games, and if I could reference Metroid one more time, specifically Other M, it deviated enough to annoy or anger fans into not engaging, and its failure wound up convincing the publishers that the industry at large has no interest in the franchise as a whole. And that's a really sad thing. Raw numbers really shouldn't be all there is to the success and failure of these games. Their sales require context. Why does a game do well? Why does a game not do well? There are reasons for this. Microsoft is not a skeevy company like EA, who will encourage or force anti-consumer practices like microtransactions into a game like Dead Space 3, watch it sell lousy or even just disappointing numbers, and outright just kill the developer. The failure of Nuts and Bolts should have sent a message to Microsoft and Rare and sent them back to the drawing board, not put the franchise on the back burner. Yet, here we are. With the exception of Rare Replay and an obscure cameo or cheeky tweet, we would not meet Banjo and Kazooie again for 11 years. Fast forward to E3 2019, if you're watching this, you already know what's up. Banjo and Kazooie are in Smash, baby! I don't think many fans would disagree going forward, no matter who is left in the Fighter Pass. Banjo is such an exciting and arguably electrifying inclusion that he alone is worth the price of admission of jumping into Smash Bros. And downloading that DLC. Having been added in over 10 years after Rare's acquisition by Microsoft and their Xbox brand, this moment changes history, and it's probably going to be remembered for many, many years. The trailer is beautifully constructed and complete with a brand new remix of Spiral Mountain as composed by the brilliantly talented Grant Kirkhope, exemplifying a newly rendered 64-style Banjo and Kazooie and showing them using their classic moves and speaking their old sound effects from the old games as if they had never gone away. The trailer is so full of excitement and hype that in a fun twist, even the Smash characters present are getting in on the cheering. It was a truly wonderful reveal, which for many people won Nintendo E3 2019. I myself audibly gasped when I saw that bouncing Jiggy. It can't be stated enough just how happy and unified this made fans of video games all across the internet. Seriously, pause this video and go look up Banjo Smash Reaction Compilation. Turn down the volume on your device and just watch the excitement flow. I even witnessed people on different message boards and comment sections who didn't seem to know or particularly care for Banjo suddenly indulging the joy and congratulating us fans. To make things even more interesting, while Nintendo's entire E3 presentation was largely positively received, it didn't make the biggest splash in terms of trending on social media, whereas Banjo's Smash trailer practically broke the algorithms. People wanted Banjo, and what people got was indeed some Banjo.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh?
Banjo.
Banjo?
Banjo.
Which allows me to segue into the core argument to be made here. Guys, Microsoft, Rare, Phil Spencer, buddy! Hear me out when I say this. Now is the time to make Banjo-Threeie. Us fans, we want to see Banjo in his own game series again. Not in LEGO Racers, not in a port, although a Switch port would certainly not go unappreciated, but in a brand new entry that continues to provide what we all love about these characters and their world. Keeping Banjo and Kazooie's designs consistent with their appearances in Smash Bros. Would also be a wonderful treat, but honestly, I'll even accept the Nuts and Bolts design at this point if it at least means having the familiar action platforming and exploration gameplay. Look, Nintendo had a very solid E3 this year, and showcased some really cool stuff, at least in my view. But Banjo's Smash Bros. Reveal was such a massive bombshell, even those of us who knew it was coming ahead of time through leaks we're still hugely surprised. This industry clearly wants Banjo-Kazooie. There has to be enough obvious demand for a new good entry in this series at this point. And I'm not just asking for an HD reimagining or continuation of Tooie either. Go ahead and add some new moves and abilities, throw in some new types of collectibles if you must, maybe an online mode or something. You don't necessarily have to use Kazooie or Tooie as cheat sheets. All you really need to do is look at what made these two games so fun and charming and give the next entry some nuance to modernize it, polish it, and make it feel like a fresh and inspired experience without deviating so far as to make a whole different type of game. Like Lego Racers. Hey, you ever play the actual Lego Racers? You know, the one back in the day? It's a pretty fun racer. It's not even just Smash Brothers and the hype buzz it's creating that really sells this idea, in my opinion. In recent years, action platformer games that emphasize open environments with a lot of exploration and verticality have been on the rise. Nintendo just blew out two of the best Mario and Zelda games, at least in my opinion, to date, while indie titles such as Poi and A Hat in Time have been serving up some additional collectathoning on the side. Hell, even former Rare alumni came together, formed Playtonic, and created a very similar experience in the form of Yooka-Laylee. What I'm getting at is there is a demand for these exploring games, where you fight baddies and collect lots of cool stuff. So, Microsoft and Rare, you guys who still house one of the most quintessential franchises known for the influence it has on this genre. You still seem rather coy on greenlighting this new installment, and while I'm no analyst or expert, prior to this E3, I can sort of understand, but now we're at a point where a fan-friendly new Banjo entry performing well seems like an inevitability. Banjo and Kazooie are clearly still very beloved characters, as are their first two games, and as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to pass by E3 without any sign of them to grace our eyes in any notable or practical way. With Smash Brothers, we're now in a satisfying situation where, at least in the eyes of many fans, these characters are now back where they belong with Nintendo, with a trailer that clearly shows a lot of love for the characters as well as the fans, taking all those years of enjoyment and just meticulously crafting it into this one moment. If there was any time in which the idea of a successful modern interpretation of these characters is viable, it's now. To Microsoft, to Nintendo, and Mr. Sakurai, to everybody involved who made this wonderful crossover happen, I want to extend my thanks to you. On behalf of mostly myself, but I'm sure on behalf of many, many fans within this industry. Thank you all for coming together and making this wonderful history-changing event happen. Banjo and Kazooie are back, everybody. Restored to glory in Smash Brothers, and we love every bit of it. But now it's on Microsoft to keep that momentum going, to take advantage of the hype train and make the franchise itself truly relevant again. Us fans are here, and we're waiting. Oh, and if you could also put it on Switch, like those other cute platformer games you brought to E3, that'd be pretty cool too. I'll buy both versions, without any hesitation. So I thought I'd go off script a bit here and just talk a bit about how I'm feeling on the industry as a whole. Honestly, there's a lot wrong with it, but I think there's a lot right with it too. A lot of really good developers out there, kind of up and coming. You got Cyberpunk coming out. We've got a bunch of cool Nintendo games coming soon. I know that there's a lot wrong with certain avenues, like the stuff with the Epic Game Store is insane. Just plain old insane. Maybe that'll be its own video one day. And obviously you have the likes of EA screwing the pooch on microtransactions every other day. It's crazy. But there's still a lot of cool games coming out, and that leaves me optimistic. I hope it leaves you optimistic too. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please be sure to leave a like. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Feel free to agree or disagree on my points. And of course, if you like my art, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. Anyway, that's everything I've got to say for today. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!